Greetings and welcome to the Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm going over the balance changes needed for Kill Team in the upcoming Balance Dataslate. But please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment, let me know what you thought of today's video. Remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, and a affiliate link at Irma Games, and a affiliate link and discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But yeah, once again, we're going over my regular kind of video where, based on tournament stats, talking to players, playing an event, I go over what I'd like to see changed for Kill Team in the upcoming Balance Dataslate. We are due one at the end of July, so this is kind of my preemptive way to kind of foresee or kind of hope what they do when we get that huge balance update. As a kind of general summarization, the meta is still incredibly wonky post Blood and Zero release. Now, we did have the meta kind of improve a bit after the Balance Dataslate, like in the first month after, but it's kind of all tailed down again in June. The teams that were doing better now are doing worse again, and the teams that were overperforming are doing even better. So it's kind of gone really badly. Hierotek Circle and Sanctifiers are dominating the meta, but also being huge gatekeepers because of the number of teams that they just check and kind of prevent from being competitive. Several factions need buffs and nerfs, so we're still in like a not great state. Not as bad as when the edition first launched, but it's not improved as much. And then once again, hopefully we see internal team rebalancing along with the nerfs. That would be great. But yeah, once again, these suggestions are based on the stats as well as general feedback and experience from tournaments and events. So starting off with core rule changes, first I would add that operatives aren't valid targets if they're within control range of enemy operatives. I keep repeating this, it's probably never going to happen, but I might as well keep up because it does fix a lot of things. You can improve Beta Decima unless they're going to get rid of it. You know, there's lots of ways they could. I'm tired of saying how they could fix it. Once again, mines cannot overlap with other terrain equipment, such as razor wire, so you can't have like long terrain walls which kind of stop the opponent moving up. Then you only get an additional command point for going second if it was given to you, not if you choose to go second. So this kind of hurts the whole idea of like, oh, I've won initiative, you had it first last time, I'm going to give it to you so this time I can go second and get 2 CP, but I was never going to be aggressive anyway. So hopefully that kind of change would be really great. Age of Sigmar did something similar, tweaking their initiative, so that would be great for us. Then with something new, first I would make stun grenades. For the main target, the dice roll is on a 2-up instead of a 3-up. Additional targets within 1 inch of that operative still trigger on a 3-up, but this is just to make stun grenades more useful. I did toy around with the idea of making the first target is automatically -1 APL, but I think that would be too strong. The issue is between smokes and stuns, smokes are just better because they're more reliable and last longer. At least if stun grenades got boosted in their reliability, it would make the choice between stuns and smokes a little bit better. And then you can only perform universal actions during counter actions. This means you can only do reposition, dash, charge, fight, shoot, or mission actions, and the pickup and place marker actions. Now, it doesn't seem like a big nerf at first, but it would basically hurt elite teams quite heavily because of their ability to do universal actions on counteract. Now, this would actually hurt teams who are out activated, so they couldn't, like, for example, against a 12 operative team, a 10 operative team then couldn't counteract comms, because comms would be a unique action to give someone +1 APL. But overall, that would help tone down the power of elite operatives when they counteract. Starting off with buffs for Angels of Death, they're probably actually not going to get any changes. They consistently have the most games, they have the most reliable tournament data, but they're not doing great. However, Jeweler is a bit of a problem. It's kind of too powerful with the crit effect, because the thing is, when they roll a crit, they will just block 2 of your successes, which is very strong, and all of a sudden it makes a combat that you should have won, just means you instantly lose because they randomly rolled a crit. So I understand people's upset over that effect. But the thing is, if you remove that, this kill team has nothing. So as a way to offset that huge nerf, you can now pick chapter tactics each game instead of at the start of a tournament. Because I think chapter tactics means you have a set of chapter tactics you can flex between, not the fact you're locked into 2 permanently. This would help with their flexibility and actually boost their power quite a bit, offsetting the power of Jeweler, but means they're more flexible and, you know, more forgiving to play. So I think with that change, Angels of Death would actually, while they would lose, well, they'd hate the fact that they've lost the double block with crits from Jeweler. The fact you can now just pick your chapter tactics every game synergizes how they work on pickup games, and it just makes them easier to play and play with. For Elucidian Starstriders, they've been underperforming quite badly, but I don't think it's because the team's bad. It's because the meta they're in. So firstly, the only thing they really need at the moment is just allow their balanced and ceaseless auras to stack. So currently these auras have been like prevented from stacking, but most other kill teams allow it, and I think they really need it. At least if they get that and, you know, it's too powerful after all the nerfs, they can remove it in 3 months. But I think that's all they need. They don't need a boost to their melee. Just being able to stack the ceaseless and balanced auras would be really useful for this kill team, while still keeping them strong, but not in an overpowered way. Farstalker Kinband are in a similar-ish like situation as Elucidian Starstriders. They're a really powerful kill team. The problem is the meta they're in is also not great. So I think the way that would help them the most is with Cutthroats. So I would change it so now Cutthroats also grants rending in addition to +1 attack. However, if a friendly operative already has the rending rule, then they gain lethal 5-up instead. So notably, the Crew Hounds and your Stalker, that would actually be really useful for those operatives, but it gives the team a way to punch up into 8 wounds operatives. And, you know, it does mean Cutthroats is kind of a crazy ploy, but it helps into 8 wound teams and even 7 wound teams when you're trying to get that kill. But it's just really useful and would help the team a lot overall. Then for Hand of the Archon were unnecessarily hurt. Like, look, we all agree the bird needed nerfing, but stimulated sensors was too much and it's actively made the team very bad. They've severely dropped off. So instead of, I thought about, you know, buffing their poisons and combat drugs, and I was like, you know what, just make stimulated sensors back to giving ceaseless. So you get to reroll any one of 1 attack dice or defense dice. Just give them that back. I think it's a very simple fix. If they're still not performing well because of, you know, getting ceaseless back, then you can look at buffing them in other ways. But they really need this back. The fact they changed it to balance just felt incredibly rude. So helping buff that would be great for the kill team. Then for Hearthkyn Salvagers, once again, considering like with Farstalker Kinband and Elucidian Starstriders, they're a very solid team, just slightly underperforming. And I think you can just tweak Writ of Claim. So you can do 2 things. Firstly, you could either make Writ of Claim also reroll your opponent's dice instead of your own dice for the initiative, or both. It can be reused if the reroll fails. So I understand, you know, it was way too strong the way it worked, but at the moment people aren't finding it really useful at all. I think at least if you could reuse it, if you fail the initiative reroll, or if you could reroll your opponent's dice because you're saying, I'm claiming this objective, then that would help. It was a nice thing because the team is still really good, and similar to a lot of teams that need buffs, they're also gate kept quite heavily by Sanctifiers, so this would help boost them overall. Hunter Clade, I'm literally just repeating myself. I don't think it will happen at this point, but you don't get any depreciations for the first time you use an imperative. Unfortunately, it seems like this will not happen. And then increase Rust Stalkers to movement 7, kind of almost half giving them back optimized gate. This would just be something to make the team better. You hear rumors of people saying this team is very strong, and then they don't place anywhere. They may win a game or 2. They may do slightly well at one event, and then they just die everywhere else. So they do need these buffs, but based on how we've gone in the last 2 balanced data slates, it looks like probably nothing will happen. Then for Imperial Navy breaches, first for system override, I would change it to affect mission actions instead of the operate hatch action. This makes them more useful on non-Gallowdark boards and, you know, makes them a bit better. And then also just allows stims to give +1 wound, because once again, they're in a problem scenario where you can't buff the operatives because it would buff them in Inquisition. So at least doing it this way would help them overall. It makes them very tanky. I don't think you need to make their shotguns 4/4 damage. If they go up to 8 wounds, well, minimum 8 wounds, because then your gunners will be 9 wounds. You also got brace for counteract, so you've got more ways to like ensure your -1 damage. I think that would make them more interesting as a grinding down kill team and basically suit them better. So that should be enough. It's probably not enough to boost them up at the moment, but it would be a good helping point. Then for Kasrkin, they need so many buffs, especially as they're kind of invalidated by Tempestus Aquilans. But firstly, I would add a new skill at arms that allows you to do mission actions at -1 action point costs. So this is similar how to the compendium used to work. This is not like, while it'd be useful, maybe on Gallowdark turning point 1, this would actually be really useful for your leader, because your leader can make someone have a different skill at arm once per turning point. So you can have someone walking around with this. It is a bit kind of overkill with the double comms, but it means you now have a dedicated double comms for killing, you know, someone free APO going reposition dash shoot, and then you can have operatives running around doing mission actions. And then also for cover retreat, I would change it so it allows the shooting operative to also change their order from conceal to engage. So this is the one where you fall back and then you pick another friendly operative within 6 to do a shoot action. Now, especially when you get charged early in the game, you don't really get much use out of this unless you've brought the sniper. So allowing you also to change your order lets you punish aggressive opponents even better, and it makes the ploy more useful. This probably won't be enough to boost the team to higher levels because of Tempestus Aquilans, but I think it would be more than what they, well, a good starting point for where they are at the moment. For Kommandos, they just need some boostage. So firstly, for Get It Done, I would make it so it can either give +1 APL to a friendly operative, or you get +1 command point. So kind of mirroring how it works for like other operatives, like kind of like Phobos and Brood Brothers, where their leaders can strategize, or comms can effectively give them +1 command point. The Dynamite to gain Piercing 1, I kind of completely missed. It didn't have Piercing 1. I think for how much weaker it is, Piercing 1 makes a lot of sense for how it works, especially as it's only blast 1 inch. Makes it more encouraging to take. And then finally, the Harpoon, I would grant to give it Silent. So it kind of, because if you look at the Harpoon model itself, it's just like on a little gas-propelled launcher. So that could be silent. That would make quite sense. And it would also synergize more with how the faction works. Because it was explained to me, basically, even if you want to use harpoons, you have to switch to engage, and then you just get blown apart. So at least, you know, because of its reduced range, the fact it's silent would synergize more with how Kommandos work, and allows them to apply some safe ranged threat. Because at the moment, you know, they do have the Sniper Boy, which was silent for 1 shoot action, and then you have like all your other shooting has to be you want to engage. So, you know, obviously your Slasher Boy has throwing knives, which are silent, but this would be a nice change that would help the team quite a bit to just make them not too dominating, but just more useful with how they play overall. Ratlings also need some buffs. They're not doing well. So firstly, for your leader's target designation, I would make it so it doesn't require visibility. So you just pick someone on the kill zone. Helps because you're so tiny, you're so short. And then for crack shots, change it to grant Ceaseless instead of Balanced. I think this is a good starting point for the kill team, because especially with Ceaseless, it allows you to trigger, you know, kind of fish for crits more. I did think about making all your stationary sniper rifles just hit on 2s, but I don't know. Like, the big problem is more like they're just tiny. They're so small. They're just so short. So at least getting rid of some ways to mitigate their height would help. Once again, this probably isn't enough, but we can do cautious buffs and then go from there. Like, as I said, next quarter, they could probably make the snipers all hit on 2s if that didn't help. But that should be a nice starting point. Then for Scout Squad, I'm repeating myself once again. Give them a 7th scouting option so they can do 7, you know, so they're allowed to do 7 instead of 6. And then make the Heavy Bolter and Missile Launcher heavy reposition instead of heavy dash. They are Astartes after all, even if they're Astartes in training. Just makes the kill team more mobile and more threatening, and rewards you for planning more. So it's a nice, interesting way to improve the kill team. Then for Vespid Stingwings, I would increase all operatives to 7-inch movement. It really effectively gives you a 9-inch threat range for your fly, making you very deadly. You would need to adjust, obviously, the range on the Sky Torch operative, but I think that'd be really good. Oversight Drone, just give it expendable, please. Just give it expendable so it doesn't count towards a kill up. And then change all instances of accurate to balance/ceaseless. So effectively, when you use a ploy to give yourself, when you use a communion point to give yourself accurate 1, if you're already benefiting from balance, then you change to ceaseless instead. Because remember, all your shooting rolls trigger on like rolling a crit. So that would really help a lot. That would help so much. The thing is, they would be quite dangerous at a 7-inch move, but because they're all 2 APL, it also means they're not so pinned down on Gallowdark. It just makes them more interesting as a whole, especially as they're capped as a 2 APL kill team. Then for Wrecka Krew, they probably don't need any buffs, but I think they need some tweaks. So firstly, for tanked up, I'd have it also trigger when you do charge actions. I think the biggest problem this kill team has is when they're stunned, they're completely useless. Because if you stun a Wrecka Krew that isn't in combat and they can't shoot you, they can do basically nothing. They can charge you and pass, which doesn't really feel thematic to the kill team. So making tanked up trigger on charge actions as well as doing fight and shoot actions just makes sense. And then also allow them to gain a Wrecka point every time you use the break stuff action. For me, this just feels right. So you get a point if you break a terrain piece, like you break an equipment piece, or you smash a wall, because you're literally getting a Wrecka point because you've broken something. That would be really nice and add a nice passive way to generate more Wrecka points. So nothing crazy, but enough just to make Wrecka Krew a bit more reliable. Now we go into nerfs. So starting off with Brood Brothers, while they haven't done too well for this quarter, they are still a very strong team. So as we've seen in past balanced data slates, they're not just going off win rates alone. So firstly, I would change it so you can't use Insidious Turning Point 1 or with the Patriarch, and you can't use Ruthless Coordination Turning Point 1. This basically means the team can't abuse the enemy operatives Turning Point 1, especially if they move up, because when you do covert when you do cult geysers to do the free 3-inch move up, then you can use Insidious to move another 3 inches, then you can reposition and dash, so that's 9 inches, so that's a 15-inch threat range with a plus 2 inches, and then you can just Ruthless Coordination someone, which is really unfair. So at least limiting that affects how, you know, damaging them can be Turning Point 1. Then for the Patriarch, I would remove its movement restriction of 9 inches per turning point and change it to it can only do 1 reposition, 1 charge, and 1 dash action per turning point. So you could, 1 activation, go reposition and dash to move 9 inches, then in your next activation, charge 8 inches. Now that is a lot of movement, but to offset it, you can't use Insidious with the Patriarch anymore. So you are limited to, you know, basically doing each of those once per activation. So you like once per turning point. So you can't charge fight. So you still aren't exactly crazy, but it means you're more usable. So you can really cover ground quite quickly, especially on stuff like Gallowdark can be quite threatening. So people have to respect you more and just makes the Patriarch more interesting to take. Then for the Magus is quite a problem. So firstly, Telepathic Overload, change to valid target instead of visible. And then I would also add, you can spend +1 APL to work on visible operatives, just like your comms. Your comms has a similar thing, and at least it allows you, if you want to ping visible operative, you're spending 2 APL, and it means you can't do the thing where you can like reposition, make someone -1 APL, and then mind blast someone else. So I think that would help tone down the Magus. Then for Spiritual Leader, add everyone takes D3 +1 damage when the Magus is incapacitated. This isn't how it works in 40k, but I think it makes sense because of how powerful Spiritual Leader is. Now, a lot of people saying, oh, you know, it's almost impossible to kill the Magus, but at least this time if you kill the Magus, the kill team has a severe backlash, so you get rewarded for trying to seek it out. And then finally, to make the Patriarch, the Primus a bit better, just make it scoped Needle Pistol, gain stun on both profiles. This is partly because stun weapons, well, needle weapons across multiple kill teams all have stun, and I think it would make it very interesting for the Primus, making it more useful and more encouraging to take, the same as it is for the Patriarch, while making the Magus less useful. Then for Chaos Cult, it's a quite simple nerf. Just make Fervent Onslaught only give accurate 2 to mutants and devotees. So it's removed from torments and instead makes devotees better, which makes sense. I think accurate 2 on torments is too good, but at least this way, instead of just removing it from torments, giving it to devotees means it's more reliable, the fact that you're actually going to try and get these to kill and mutate into mutants. So very simple, but I think that's all they really need, and then Chaos Cult will be perfectly fine. Goremongers need a lot of nerfs. Now, they're doing fine from win rate wise, but tournament performance, they're just winning and podiuming too much. They're the new Felgor. So first, they also gatekeep tons of teams. So firstly, I would change Rejuvenate from Sangue Vitae to reduce healing from 2d3 to D3 plus wounds, because at the moment they heal too much. This is more sensible and aligns with other healing. Then for Gory Tenacity, they need to change it so the reduced damage is to a minimum of 2 and works once per operative per turning point. I did think about making it only work when you're fighting and not when retaliating, but it's really silly, especially when you're playing like Elucidian Starstriders or stuff with damage 2 in melee, and you're like, okay, I've knocked them down to 8 wounds. I just need to punch them. And you get 2 hits. You punch them for 2 damage. It's halved to 1. Then they kill you. Horrible feeling. Really horrible. Just makes Gory Tenacity a lot more balanced. Then Impending Apotheosis, make it only work on normal damage because that's how all these abilities should work. So just tones down the leader a bit. And then for Incite the Hunt, change to when this operative inflicts damage with a shoot or fight action with weapons on its data card. Because at the moment, when it inflicts damage with raking or flowing frag grenades, it can actually generate way too many of these bleeding tokens, which feels unintentional and allows the team to generate way too many gore tanks on a team that already has quite generous gore tank generation, and it kind of like rewards them too much and means they're never empty. So this just make the Inciter would still be good, it would just be less crazy, and you're also reducing the durability of the leader, all operatives, and knocking down their healing a bit. Personally, I still like Runes of Khorne. I know a lot of people hate them, but I think that works. That's not the problem. It's everything else that you can see on screen. Then for Hierotek Circle, they need several changes. So firstly, reanimated operatives do not reverse the kill op / kill grade. This is a big problem, and it allows Hierotek Circle to basically always win on the kill op, which is completely unfair. The fact they can reverse it is really damaging and allows them an advantage no one else in the game has. This needs to change 100% because, oddly, Hierotek Circle can actually pick the kill op or just know they're always going to be +2 points minimum than their opponent, which is crazy. It's too much advantage in the game. Then for Nanomine, I would reduce the range to, instead of visible, pick within 6 inches and visible of the Chronomancer, like a smoke grenade. So it's closer range. And then for Time Splinter, reduce it to 4 inches on both ranges. So you pick someone within 4 inches and place them within 4 inches of the Chronomancer, and it cannot teleport operatives into control range of enemy operatives, because currently you can. It shouldn't be allowed to do that. And then it loses the support keyword. That would basically not complete, I mean, it would heavily nerf Time Splinter, but remember, you can pick someone 4 inches away and then move them another 4 inches away, so it's like it can actually be more than an 8-inch teleport, so it's still very, very good. It just stops it from being at minimum a 12-inch teleport into control range, allowing you to like magnify through people. Then for the Harbinger of Despair, reduce to 6-inch range as well as being visible for the Psychomancer instead of picking a point and visible. This actually makes it easier for horde teams, so they don't get destroyed when trying to play the crit op. And then Nightmare Shroud, increase the range from 4 inches to 6 inches. So if someone is within range of your Despair aura, they're also within range of your Nightmare Shroud, and it boosts the range of your Nightmare Shroud, so it's more useful. And then finally, for the Technomancer, increase its Canoptic Repair to 3d3 instead of 2d3. Now, this team needs all these changes because it's currently way too good, and it is mainly the Chronomancer. The only reason I've nerfed the Psychomancer slightly is because Harbinger of Despair is very damaging into horde teams that aren't Space Marines. Space Marines don't care, but this is more for the health of non-Space Marine, non-free APL teams. But with all of those, that should actually knock Hierotek Circle down to be more manageable for most opponents. Pathfinders need some nerfs, you know, no -1 operative this time. I'm keeping all their buffs, so they keep all the buffs they had, so their Marklights are way more efficient. This time though, you cannot use Recon Sweep Turning Point 1. This once again mirrors how other movement ploys work, so you can't use them Turning Point 1. And then the Fusion Grenade is changed to Heavy Reposition, once again mirroring stuff like the Melter Bomb from other factions, because, you know, the Super Grenades in every other faction are Heavy Reposition. For some reason in Pathfinders, they didn't give it heavy, so you can reposition dash, throw a fusion grenade, so limiting that helps a lot. And then for the Grav drone, change its movement modifier to work like the Nanomine. So it can't reduce you below 4 inches of movement, and also it doesn't trigger when you move through it. So you have to start and end within the aura. Because at the moment, with this kind of -2 stacking, it's kind of too powerful and it really controls enemy opponents more than it should. And then for the first 2 points, this is more just general changes. So they're still deadly, but they're no longer basically abusing people turning point 1, and they have to be more respectful with their threat ranges. Phobos Strike Team also need a nerf. They are, especially when you go into longer formats, they are way overperforming. And despite being a yassified year 1 classified team, they still need some tweaks. So firstly, I would say all spec scans should lose the Seek-like benefit, just because it's too strong, and also reduce its range from 8 inches to 6 inches. This is also mirror Hierotek, but also because all Phobos Strike Team operatives are 7-inch move, with the 8-inch aura, you can kind of bully people with it too much. And because not only does it turn off the enemy's ability to reroll attack dice, it turns off their ability to reroll defense dice, so it's very strong. So reducing it to 6 for that operative makes it a lot more balanced. And then for deadly shots, I would change it so when an enemy operative is not in cover, you still don't get the balance bonus if you have moved. So currently you only get balanced if you haven't moved and you're shooting at an operative, or you're shooting at an operative that isn't in cover. So you can kind of get rewarded for running up into someone's face, getting within 2 inches because they're no longer within cover, and then shooting them. So this kind of makes them too aggressive. At least with that change, it makes deadly shots a very defensive / punishing ploy and stops this burst aggression Phobos Strike Team have. They are already movement 7, and it would just make them a little bit more forgiving to play against, especially if you're not an elite kill team. Then for Plague Marines, they're in a situation where their win rate is fine, but they also have a very high performance when it comes to podiuming and just like placing well at tournaments. So I think the only main change they need at the moment now is that Putrescent Vitality, the healing, instead of being 2d6 picking the highest, like well, if you roll a 7, you heal 7, instead of just picking the highest, change it to just heal 2d3 wounds. So yes, you kind of on average may heal a bit more, but you don't burst up to healing 7 wounds. The fact you can heal 7 wounds is crazy, and you will be surprised how many times you heal 7 wounds. Capping it at 6, it does mean, you know, you don't have the swinginess of like healing 1 wound, like the worst you'll heal is 2, but it makes it more consistent with how other medics work. Then for Sanctifiers, they need so many nerfs. So firstly, the Confessor needs to go down from 10 wounds to 8 wounds. This means their CP generation isn't as reliable, becomes like a 50-50. Your leader still hits on freeze and is 5/5 damage, but it means it's no longer basically a Space Marine. So it really needs to be 8 wounds. Lead the Procession can only work while within 6 inches of the Confessor. So this basically kills the stuff like roaming, your roaming missionaries and preachers on objectives doing, preachers on objectives also benefiting from Lead the Procession. So if you want to benefit from Lead the Procession, you can't use a turning point 1 and you have to be within 6 inches of the Confessor. It doesn't matter if you're always on the benefits of the sermon. And then all operatives must perform the same action as the Confessor for Lead the Procession. So if the Confessor does a fallback action, everyone does a fallback action. If the leader does a reposition action, everyone does a reposition action. It stops the crazy thing where your leader falls back, 2 operatives charge, and then like 4 operatives move up and the rest of them move up, right? It just reins that in. They should all be mirroring what the leader does. And then for sermon damage reduction, there's 2 ways you could tone this down. You can either make it only work on damage of 4 or more, or only on normal damage. Either way works, but currently this team is way too resilient. Because it works on 3 or more damage, and it works on both normal and crit, despite being 7 wounds, they're more like 10 wounds for each operative, and the leader is effectively like 13 or 14 wounds, so the leader's effectively a Space Marine. It's too good, so that definitely needs to change. And then for the Drill Abbot, the null scale needs to be reduced to a 3-inch range instead of 6. This mirrors other stuff like comm jammers because the aura for removing APL modifiers is too large and just mirrors how other kill teams work. Now they're still powerful. They still have the leader stops you doing an action on a D6 roll, and they still have get down Mr. President, so they still have all this nonsense to keep their leader safe, but they're a lot more vulnerable. They're less crazy mobile, so they're no longer faster than Eldari kill teams. It just reins them in because otherwise they're just going to dominate the game still. Then Warpcoven, they also need nerfs. You know, they are still doing very well despite the severe nerfs they received. So firstly, I know it's kind of weird, but just make boons once per tournament per sorcerer. So they have to write out their boons. Now it does seem kind of counterintuitive because you know, Angels of Death have lost it, but Angels of Death would need it in this scenario. And then once again, a light change from valid target to from visible. So you have to pick someone who's a valid target to get your rerolls. Brotherhood of Sorcerers loses Ceaseless, so it's just balanced all the time. They don't need that extra boost from Ceaseless. And then once again, Temporal Flux cannot be used with Capricious Plan. So you can add in Capricious Plan. You cannot use it in an activation where you also are using the benefit of Temporal Flux. So it stops someone basically teleporting back, right? Even though it costs them a CP, this hurts their teleporting trick, meaning they just teleport 6 inches and there's no way they can abuse that as much. Their shooting has been toned down, but they're still very flexible as a kill team, keeping their power. So for the buffs and nerfs overview, the game is kind of okay competitively, but it's really partly due to players self-comping. If you have noticed, a lot of competitive players are refusing to play stuff like Sanctifiers, and you know, it can't last. You know, you can't expect people to keep doing it. We've got major tournaments coming up and people are now like, look, Sanctifiers and Hierotek are like the best teams in the game. We should basically play them. So, you know, we do need both major buffs and nerfs in the upcoming Balance Dataslate, because if you don't hit Hierotek and Sanctifiers hard, not only will they continue to perform well, they will keep gatekeeping other factions. Like Sanctifiers gatekeep effectively all Eldari teams and all other Horde teams. They're incredibly hard to deal with. They're just way too good and way too mobile. And then Hierotek, while they're great at killing elites, they're too good at killing elites and kind of too good at killing everyone. They need to lose that ability to manipulate the kill op, so they're not always minimum, basically +2 points. And then also you need to tweak Warpcoven and other stuff. Likely this is going to be the last Balanced Dataslate until after the World Championships of Warhammer, because this time it's the first week of November instead of the end of November. Now, if we do get a Balanced Dataslate at the end of July, the next one is the end of October. And worst case scenario is they still release it a week before Worlds and give it like early access 1 week to the before people play at Worlds, but more likely Games Workshop like balancing the game based on Worlds, so we're very likely to not get any more balance updates. So that's why this one needs to really be big and heavy. And then, you know, thankfully the Typhon teams were pretty balanced. You know, they're strong, but they're pretty solid. Nothing crazy like we got with Blood and Zeal. There is, like, this is the problem. Because you've got such meta warping teams, it's kind of difficult to buff the weaker teams without buffing them too crazily. So hopefully it does it in such a way that makes them still useful. Like, even if you nerf those strong teams, they're still going to be good, but just you want them to be good, but not in a way that just messes up the entire meta. And especially if you do stuff like making counteracts can only do universal actions, it kind of really hurts all other elite kill teams outside of Angels of Death, because they don't really have many unique actions. If you think about it, Nemesis Claw, Warpcoven, all the Chaos Space Marine kill teams, even Phobos, they all benefit from the fact that they can counteract and do unique actions. Removing that would really hurt elites more than I think people realize. But hopefully, you know, we'll see what happens. The Balanced Dataslate should already have been done by now, so this video coming out now is effectively moot. It's way too close. So if anything does mirror what I've said, I'm not a playtester. Hashtag not a playtester. It's not me. But we'll see. You know, it's just a fun video. We'll see what happens. Hopefully people don't get upset, but, you know, they don't really follow my changes, really. You know, and I've left Felgor alone because I don't think Felgor, they don't need buffs. They just need, like, Goremongers to get worse. You know, it's like, they don't need to win. They just need Goremongers to lose. They're still a very good kill team that are just kind of not great due to how strong other kill teams are. Like, especially Goremongers. They are quite a big problem. So hopefully we get all these gatekeep teams toned down and we will be back to a good meta. But that's pretty much it from me today. Please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video. Did you find it useful and helpful? And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description below, and a affiliate code at Games, and a affiliate code discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. I'm just going to shout out my patrons. So for my adjuncts of the crew, I have Tom, the Houston Toad, Super Cow, Nick, Mr. Meatwad, Marshall, Lucas, Graham, Fangzu, Draken, Dan, Dada Goldens, Chris, Alex, and Amorphium. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me today. I should have another video by the end of the week, and then some more cool videos coming up. I've got a lot of stuff to record, like just a lot of stuff I need to work on, you know, and I may do some hobby videos and stuff. But yeah, I'm I don't really enjoy this meta, if I'm being honest. It's not as bad as during the first part of Kill Team, but we've come to this point where I'm like, look, there's the meta's a problem and it's not fun. I know a lot of people are starting to like wind down their tournament attendance, play other games for a bit. So it really needs a big fix, and I have faith that the design team will. But remember, no matter what team gets buffed or nerfed, you always have a chance to win as long as you can roll a crit.